The Super Bowl, America's game, the big show. Spectators tune in by the millions to watch one of the greatest pastimes of American culture take place every year between Christmas and Valentine's Day. There is great appeal in the Super Bowl in that it can be alluring to all peoples. Folks may tune in for the touchdowns or the fumbles, others may prefer the aspects of joining friends and family to dine on unhealthy snacks and observing humorous commercials. But above all of that, almost as hyped as the football match itself, is that of the halftime entertainment. The Super Bowl halftime show has evolved quite a bit over the last 50 years, transforming from an optimal bathroom break into an unmissable spectacle that in some cases bring in more audience than the actual game. As of late, the halftime show is generally a venue for iconic rock acts or mediocre present-day entertainers. While delivering solid performances from time to time, the present-day halftime show undoubtedly lacks a certain je ne sais quoi, as it struggles to achieve the stellar production quality of its heyday. Of course, I am talking about the multiple times the Walt Disney Company played the Super Bowl halftime show. Are there any other entities in the world better equipped to put on a solid 10-minute show than the minds behind Jungle Cruise and the Beauty and the Beast sing-along? Over a span of 30 years, the NFL called upon the WDC to put on the ultimate show for their ultimate show, and put on the ultimate show they did 6 times. So now, let's go through the replays, let's take a look at some of the highlights, let's analyze some of the fumbles. We're gonna definitively rank the 6 times Disney played the Super Bowl halftime show. And just know that at some point, this is gonna happen. In my opinion, up until about 1977, the Super Bowl halftime show was an afterthought, a wasted venue. After a decade of mediocre and middling entertainment, the show generally consisted of local marching bands and hard-hitting football-esque music stars like Andy Williams and Carol Channing. Disney's first foray into the Super Bowl show decided to up the stakes for gridiron fans in a big way, by taking the generic and bland marching band formula and simply adding that which football fanatics crave the most. It's a small world. The Los Angeles Unified All-City Marching Band provided the instrumentals for the teeny bopper singers on the sidelines, dressed up in Mickey Mouse attire, as they all went through a zippy medley that included classics like A Big Wide Wonderful World, If You Add All the Love in the World, and of course, It's a Small World. While the 77 presentation generally lacked the exuberance we know today of the halftime show, there were certainly glimpses of the extravagant pageantry on the way. Whether you were watching the marching band moving about in synchronized choreography or the hundreds of performers unfurling flags and banners to cover the field, there was no mistake. This was certainly the most elaborate recital that had ever been put on at the show before. During the singing of the song Paloma Blanca, which translates to White Dove, seemingly dozens of actual doves are released over the crowds as the on-field banners join to form what I promise you is probably supposed to be a dove. Even the new Mouseketeers make a brief appearance as they walk across the field dressed as children of the Empire 4 whole months before Star Wars would be released into theaters. And look at all these guys dressed up as Robin Hood for no reason. During the finale, a rousing rendition of It's a Small World, a gigantic planet Earth is presented on the 50-yard line. Simultaneously, thousands of balloons are released into the sky as the colorful flags on the field seem to extend into the Rose Bowl itself, in what would be the first audience participation card stunt at the Super Bowl. While lackluster in comparison, like the card stunt, there were many elements here that had never been seen at the halftime show before, primarily in how the at-home audience was able to take it in. There are multiple camera angles taken from the Goodyear blimp and the sidelines, a fisheye lens from above, and even one attached to the released balloons prove Disney's dedication to properly showcasing their efforts. And the suits noticed, and they'd be invited back to host the show 5 more times. But maybe in the future they would drop, the whole kid performers and It's a Small World things, Or, wait, what? Oh yeah.
It truly is is a small world, ladies and gentlemen.
And now, live from Tampa Stadium, it's the first ever all-kids Super Bowl halftime show!
Yay! The 1991 halftime show would have been Disney's fourth time with the gig, and while it's certainly an improvement from a production standpoint, it's a weird show, and it had its own weird set of outside struggles as well. This halftime show had the ultimate challenge of being presented just 11 days after the start of Operation Desert Storm in the Gulf War. In fact, this show was only seen live by the in-stadium crowds, as ABC opted to air live Peter Jennings war coverage instead. The show would be aired for many stations in its entirety after the game concluded. Through the duration of the show, we can find many sentimental and respectable touches within dedicated to the men and women serving overseas, but you can tell that they likely weren't originally supposed to be there. So while that was a big obstacle, it can't be solely to blame for its 5th place placement here. The 91 halftime show, clearly drawing upon the success of its 77 outing, decided to recapture the magic of that event as this show was titled
A small world salute to 25 years of the Super Bowl.
Which basically meant it was going to be kids singing about football. And to describe it very basically, that's what it was, but also some patriotism now. By this time, Disney had truly developed and honed in on the spectacle they'd be known for. With a cast of over 2,000 uniquely costumed kids and a flurry of Disney characters performing over a football field full of stages, massive balloons, and gigantic small world-esque set pieces, Disney proved once again to be capable hands for the venue. But still, the premise is weird, and the past and future shows are gonna be weird, but this is still, it's weird, and the set list is weird. It was a seemingly rampant medley that included Holding Out for a Hero and We Are the World, and of course, It's a Small World. There's just a lot of weird stuff that happens here, like when Houston Oilers quarterback Warren Moon stands silently while being serenaded by Minnie Mouse and a bunch of young cheerleaders as they sing about how only football players get the girls. And then this little kid sings Bette Midler. For a while.
You still have the time to be my friend.
And it also included a well-intentioned but semi-lengthy interluding message from President Bush. The saving grace of this show for me is the definitely weird but uniquely magical and refreshing Chip and Dale Super Bowl rendition of a classic 1990s staple. Of course, as we'd come to find out by now, a Super Bowl halftime show cannot live by kids alone. And about 10 minutes into this small world concert, these kid performers had become stale and old. And the Super Bowl halftime show needed some new kids on the block. Who played the hits for a football stadium full of children they had just colossally upstaged. While the show in and of itself is, as I stated, very weird, we can still see how Disney had grown in its halftime production. Not only with pyrotechnics and visually impressive set pieces, but also in the TV direction. There are things presented here that only the television audience got to see. And it was almost better to watch it at home than in person. I mean, you had control of the volume there, which I think is interesting. Oh yeah, and Roger Rabbit showed up for a little while too, so yeah, what's next? And we're back at the Rose Bowl. This was the third outing as far as Disney-produced halftime shows went. Put on specifically by Disneyland, the theme of the 21st Super Bowl halftime show was, you probably guessed it, a salute to Hollywood's 100th anniversary, the world of make-believe. The Disneyland connection is slightly odd considering Walt Disney World was hard at work already for Disney MGM Studios, which would open as a physical destination celebration of Hollywood just 2 years later. But alas, this is merely a stray observation from, again, a very weird show. After a whimsical introduction from Hollywood itself by George Burns himself, the true halftime entertainment would begin back at the Rose Bowl as familiar tin toy soldiers would join the Grambling State and University of Southern California marching bands and dancers on the field. There, Mickey Mouse and Mickey Rooney would unexplainably take the stage and begin a medley of songs from the Hollywood catalog, including Hooray for Hollywood, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and Footloose. Yeah, why not? You know, I just knocked the previous entry as being weird, and that was probably a little unfair, because this is weird. Like, it's really weird.
I'm turning it loose.
Doesn't this all just scream Super Bowl to you? Okay, so, yeah, I mean, but hey, I'm still having a good time. While there's a lot of action and pageantry on the field in the way of balloons and balloon arches, this might be the most muted or the least colorful presentation that Disney ever did. There's just so much white.
So white my eyes are burning.
Again, with all three of these shows so far, there seems to be a pretty distinct disconnect between the rough and toughness of the Super Bowl and the delicate nature of Hollywood and small world children. But every time, Disney managed to engage its audience. I mean, just look at these captivated spectators. I'll give 87 the edge over 91, and it is an edge if only for the George Burns enriching introduction and its grand finale, a sweeping and thematic presentation of When You Wish Upon a Star. You know, a Disney song classic that's not It's a Small World. Fun fact, while this Super Bowl certainly had a memorable Disney-esque middle, perhaps an even more iconic Disney moment would occur during the postgame, as this would be the first Super Bowl to feature the winning quarterback declaring the ultimate way to celebrate a victory.
Sims, you just won the Super Bowl. What are you doing next?
I'm gonna go to Disney World.
But, no, dude, Phil, this is the Disneyland show. Disneyland produced this one. Anyway, what's next? This was the game that they talk about in Castaway.
We have a pro football team now, but they're in Nashville.
Yeah. We went to the Super Bowl last year.
I missed that.
Oh, he would have died. It was so exciting. They almost won by 1 yard. One lousy yard right at the end.
But for some reason, Helen Hunt had nothing to say about the very Epcot-centric halftime show, which I think is arguably the most important thing Tom Hanks missed while he was out there with the volleyball. Epcot may have had the most fun with the beginning of the new millennium. While the rest of us were panicky about Y2K, Imagineers were devising some of the most bizarrely fantastic celebrations Walt Disney World had ever seen. Namely via the Millennium Celebration, a visually and sonically arresting event in the World Showcase. And luckily for the rest of us, Disney felt it apt to share some of those concepts of unifying commemoration with the Super Bowl. This halftime show arguably should be the best one. I mean, it has all of the right ingredients. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Reflections of Earth is one of the best pieces of music ever written. And the rest of the Tapestry of Nations soundtrack isn't too far behind. And so, by association, having this piece performed by a live orchestra in-house makes this halftime show the best halftime show musically, or instrumentally. Listen to that crowd, guys. A stadium literally screaming about the start of Reflections of Earth is how every Illumination should have started. We should have been that excited every single time we watched it. And let's face it, we probably were. This, plus the combination of dancers and aerial acrobatics, gigantic puppets, and extreme pyrotechnics make for one of the most visually striking halftime shows of the last 2,000 years. There's not quite Illuminations level fireworks here, but it makes up for it with vivid and vibrant lighting on nearly every onstage element. This Epcot show is definitely weird, not as weird as the previous two. well, okay, it's definitely as weird, but it's weird in a good, better, evocative, humanity-appreciating kind of way. But the Epcot show ranks third because the Epcot show infused something it entirely didn't need. And that's pop stars. I know, it's a Super Bowl halftime show, and that's what we perceive needs to be there, but this proves that the notion could be wrong. The pop star killed the Super Bowl. The only things that these guys added to the music was annoyingly unnecessary vibrato. It's true though, Epcot didn't need it, but I guess the Super Bowl did. And so the Super Bowl did as the Super Bowl does and brought in Christina and Enrique and Tony. Fine performers in their own right, but they just can't compete with this stuff. They brought in Edward James Olmos to do his best Jim Cummings impression, which is adequate, but not the same.
Once again, as it does every 1,000 years, the gateway of time has opened, giving us hope for a better tomorrow.
At least when Phil Collins showed up for a little while, he stuck to the script, doing nothing from Epcot, opting for an underappreciated but still appropriate Tarzan track. And when Toni Braxton takes the stage for the We Go On finale, we see a familiar face in the white dub from the '77 show, as he returns in much better shape. It's here where the overarching and celebratory message of peace and unity is actually received quite agreeably. This is one of the only shows that seemingly eliminated the Super Bowl from itself. There's no reference to it being the halftime show, you hardly ever see the stadium crowd, and most of the TV direction came from within the uniquely lit and crowded theater in the round they had set up right in the middle of the Georgia Dome. In spite of my qualms with casting, everything else about this show is a home run, it's a touchdown. Enrique and the gang, they just couldn't quite stick the point after for me. I admit I don't understand what I'm looking at most of the time, but I know it looks nice, and it generally sounds amazing. For being such a vivacious show about the premise of new beginnings, this, chronologically, was the last time Disney played the Super Bowl.
Reflections of Earth.
The year is 1984 and the Disney halftime show is still pretty weird. If there's anything we've learned from Disney in the last decade or so, it's that they love doing remakes, and generally those remakes have their moments, but ultimately they don't work quite as well as their original take. Well, that kind of happened a long time ago actually, in 1984. 3 years before the Salute to Hollywood show, Disney performed A Sparkling Salute to the Silver Screen, a significantly better version of their '87 show. This show was only Disney's second outing with the venue, and the difference between '84 and '87 is remarkable. Having not yet abandoned the marching band concept, the musicians of the University of Florida and FSU marching bands maintained the traditional aspect of the halftime shows previous, but this time, the bands would no longer be the on-field spectacle. Instead, there would be dancing, there would be fireworks, there would be Disney characters. Up until this point, every Super Bowl halftime show more or less looked the same. The 1984 halftime show was the halftime show that turned the halftime show into the halftime show. Disney had transformed the simple song and dance numbers into something whimsical with a special showmanship that would now be expected for every halftime show that followed it. Make no mistake, it was surely Disney's involvement and their dedication to doing the greatest show that seemed to truly make the halftime show the huge event that we know it as today. As the show concludes, the anchor states, it was the best Super Bowl show they ever had.
Firecrackers, balloons, beautiful costumes, it was glittering, and the best Super Bowl halftime we've ever had.
And she wasn't wrong. After watching them side by side, no one could deny the change, the improvement, even if it was a little weird. And it was definitely weird. Here, Disney presented another medley of classic Hollywood staples that once again included Hooray for Hollywood, Singin' in the Rain, and You Oughta Be in Pictures.
You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see.
This is the show where Disney utilized its characters in the best way. This is the kind of lively entertainment you find in the parks, whether it's goofy, goofily tap dancing to Puttin' on the Ritz. Or Minnie mousily chanting through a calypso number. Or even Donald Duck as the flustered director. There's just so much happening, so much to seemingly take in at all times. And while these guys make no sense to me, the rest definitely feels like a proper acknowledgement of classic Hollywood. Is this show better than the Illumination show? Honestly, probably not, but it is definitely more Disney. There is such a rambunctious and consistent energy in everything that happens in this show. If a song gets slightly dull, the show knew how to keep it moving, and it would do so through its Disney characters. Also, look at this, look at that. Huh? They should make this part of the cavalcades. And so we see the ultimate finale once again come with When You Wish Upon a Star, as fireworks burst above the stadium. It's like a Magic Kingdom day ending in the best way, and it happens now, at halftime. While it seems like a salute to Hollywood doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a football game, it is kind of the other end of the entertainment spectrum. When you don't have sports, you got movies, and while these classic references paired with a Raiders game is a bit of a contrast, its general sentiment is honest and appropriate, and in a very weird way, they complement one another. Because movies make sense at the Super Bowl. Movies make sense at the Super Bowl. Maybe there's something to that. Well, wait, hold on. I'm getting slightly ahead of myself again. The year is 1995, and Disney is about to open up its brand new theme park attraction in Disneyland, Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, based upon the Indiana Jones film franchise. Also, The Lion King had just come out like the year before. So, I think this is the best Disney halftime show. I even think it's the best halftime show ever, honestly. And there are some who would disagree, some who would argue that it's the worst Super Bowl halftime show ever, and honestly, I wouldn't argue that either. I think for everything that this halftime show gets wrong, and man, does it get a lot wrong, it does something right. At least conceptually, and that's why I like it. Against every show that came before or after it, the Indiana Jones show had its heart in the rightest place for what a Super Bowl show could and should be. There's no real way to sum up the set list here, so let's just break down what happened. I mean, as much as I can. We begin our show with the most enthusiastic temple chieftain ever recorded, pining for the treasure of the Super Bowl.
Bring to me the trophy!
And then with the beat of a drum, the stadium comes alive as hundreds of villagers and snakes and temple protectors take the field. But the ones in the stands are not the only spectators. The eyes of Mara are watching as well. These high stakes are plainly seen. But the Super Bowl has to Super Bowl, and so there needs to be some kind of musical act. And so, naturally, when you think of the plight of Indiana Jones, your mind goes instantly to the Lady Marmalade diva, Patti LaBelle herself, right? Yeah, Super Bowl thinks so too. As Patti LaBelle soulfully belts out her hit, Release Yourself, she's surrounded by a bunch of temple dudes as Mara observes above. Everything feels hunky-dory and natural here, so I guess we can assume that Patti LaBelle is the bad guy? The song concludes and our eyes are shifted up to the sky where our heroes Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood are flying into the stadium via flaming parachutes of fire. It becomes quickly apparent that they're here for the Super Bowl trophy too, a unique antiquity that must belong in a museum or something like that. But the dudes in the temple want to keep it too, so we're thrust into this huge action-packed fight sequence. In fact, this Indy and Marion are the ones that were performing daily just an hour and a half away at the Stunt Spectacular at MGM Studios. You'll see Marion navigates kicks and punches while Indy whips away through temple soldiers and genuine, real-life pythons. I hate snakes. And then Marion Ravenwood lights a guy on fire.
Let's get out of here!
But then they get the Lombardi, so it's all good. A flaming cinematic flourish transitions us into the next sequence where we find ourselves in a very Temple of Doom-esque beginning reminiscent nightclub starring none other than, you guessed it, iconic crooner Tony Bennett. The action takes a back seat during this number as various dancers in the Miami Sound Machine sing the Duke Ellington classic, Caravan.
A memory of our caravan. This is so exciting.
Naturally, the Super Bowl is a time for romance, and Marion prompts Indy to dance, and then they smooch. But now the Marauders want the trophy back. Controlled chaos ensues as the ultimate game of keep away takes place.
The trophy!
Come on, come on, come on. I don't even have to see anything to know that this is better than anything that took place in the first half. And so they narrowly escape, but then they go back to the Temple of the Forbidden Eye and thus return the temple that put the trophy back, I guess? Wait, so does that mean that the temple dudes won? I don't have to think about the logistics and the rationality for too long because look at the cool stuff happening with the booby trap spears. Patti LaBelle returns with a costume change. Perhaps Indy's sensible plight has inspired a change of heart within her because her allegiance to the trophy, Tamara, has seemingly changed as well. She's totally cool with Indy being there now, and now we can see that Indy's intentions are pretty noble as well.
Indiana Jones, you got your trophy back. So now tell me, sugar, what's next?
I'm giving it to the winner of Super Bowl 29.
Well, that's the right attitude, baby.
I guess you could say they all have a new attitude. What a finale. Lasers, lights, and pyro all prompt the culminating curtain call as the entire cast sings out the very Super Bowl-esque Indiana Jones appropriate, "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" Because the Lion King came out and synergy, I guess. This is a very flawed show, but at the same time, this manages to be the most extreme, the most thematic, the most football-esque halftime show that I've ever seen. They made the Super Bowl show cinematic. This is a movie playing on the field, which I think is an interesting approach. Why should the halftime show be just an elaborate concert? Disney used the halftime show to tell a story, which is indeed what Disney does best. This show was weird, and it did not stick the landing on a lot, literally, but I maintain that it was the coolest and the closest thing to what a halftime show should be. Something that manages to match, if not exceed, the action and the drama of the biggest game of the year.
We'll be back with more from Super Bowl 29 after this word about upcoming shows on ABC.
A lot of people tend to forget that Disney ever played the Super Bowl, but they played it 6 times. And 6 times is a lot of times to play the Super Bowl. It's been over 2 decades since they last had the chance, but can you imagine a Disney-produced halftime show today? Jeez. I hope they can retake that stage soon. But anyways, I'm sure the weekend will be good too. Until next time, we'll see you in the happy place. Bye!